right. Hey everyone, so my name is Maneesh. I'm going to be presenting SEIR-GA, a dynamic model for unmasking gerrymanders' impact on voter turnout and representation. And so I'm a high school student. I'm an 11th grader at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. And I started this research as part of my program experience at ASIP, which was a George Mason hosted program that I was accepted into last summer. And I worked under Professor Padmanabhan Seshayar, who's the co-author of the paper that I developed with this, as well as Dr. Alonso, um, who helped me with the technical side of things. So yeah, and they both, they work at the College of Science, Department of Mathematical Science. So I've written the affiliation. Yeah. So first of all, I want to talk about what gerrymandering is. So gerrymandering is the practice of drawing boundaries of electoral districts, basically to crack or pack and gain advantages. Sometimes the minority party uses gerrymandering to get a slight majority via like clever redistricting. Sometimes the majority party will abuse their power and try to get an unfair, wide margin in the number of districts that they control versus the ones they don't. So there's two types of gerrymandering techniques. There's packing, which is concentrating the opposition's party's voters into just a few districts. And there's cracking, which is splitting up the opposition's party voters across many districts. So that forces them into district minorities, even though as a whole, they're still a majority in the region. Yeah. So as of July 2025, there have been over 90 legal cases challenging congressional and or legislative maps in the United States. And some common ones are, Texas and California. They responded to Texas gerrymandering, but gerrymandering has been happening across both parties for a long time now, and it's become a hot topic. The state I'm in, Virginia, was recently gerrymandered as well. Um, so yeah, it's a really important topic. A lot of people don't feel like voting because they think that their vote doesn't matter. So I'm going to be talking about the impact of a single person's vote in this presentation. So why use an epidemiological model? So we use the SEIR framework. It provides a natural structure to represent this dynamic process because civic awareness spreads kind of like a disease. Uh, but also the idea that your vote doesn't matter, that idea itself also spreads like a disease. So treating civic awareness and participation like a contagion, you can simulate how exposure to gerrymandering spreads throughout a population. So voter behavior spreads through social networks, much like infectious diseases. There's a tremendous amount of research on this mode of transportation. Traditional SEIR models track populations moving between states, right? So susceptible, and this is like in the context of COVID, for example. There's susceptible, there's infected, and there's recovered. SEIR-GA model, and the G and the A stand for gerrymandering and activism. Gerrymandering works against your civic power, and activism works for your civic power. So this kind of adapts that same framework, the disease spreading framework for electoral politics. And here's a diagram of that. So here's the problem statement. Gerrymandering poses a persistent threat to equitable democratic participation by distorting electoral representation and discouraging civic engagement. While legal and political efforts attempt to mitigate its impact, there is a lack of dynamic, predictive models that quantifies long-term influence on voter behavior. And so this research aims to bridge that gap using a novel mathematical framework inspired by social epidemiology. So the problem, gerrymandering suppresses voter turnout and distorts representation, especially in marginalized communities. And the objective is to develop a mathematical model using disease modeling to simulate how voter awareness spreads, how voter suppression and disillusionment evolve, and how activism and political dominance cycles clash over time. So here are the variables for the SEIR-GA model. So the S stands for susceptible voters, who are eligible but disengaged or undecided. The E stands for exposed voters, aware of gerrymandering effects considering voting. The I stands for infected voters. The R stands for recovered voters. And these are voters who have recovered from the stains of gerrymandering, who now realize that their vote actually matters. The G stands for gerrymandering effect. And so basically the effect that uh, people who are in the minority of a gerrymandered state or district and people who are in the majority party of a gerrymandered district, both of them don't really feel like their vote actually matters. So it seems kind of counterintuitive, but voter participation actually decreases on both sides of the aisle. And A stands for activism. So activism, activists, they push the message, and I think this is a really important message that even if your vote doesn't make the tie-breaking difference, right, or which it could in some swing states, the fact that you're voting is still important because you voting also encourages other people around you to vote, and it can have a cascading effect. So maybe you voting did have an impact on other people voting, which across a large enough swath of people can actually have an impact on the election, regardless of the margin. And so here are all the parameters and differential, and these are the differential equations that I'm using. This is basically identical to a disease spread model. What I'll get into is the A function, which stands for the activism function. And I'll get into the political dominance function. Sorry, that's P. Um, and here's the function definition for the political dominance function. As you'll see, there's a there's cosines in there. So I'll get to that. We use like an inverse Fourier transform, and we use historical congressional data to analyze the spread of power margins over time. So I will get into that. So yeah, here are the model dynamics. So S goes to E. So as voters become aware of political context and gerrymandering, um, yeah, then they transition from S to E. From E to I, so aware voters become disillusioned. So they become infected, with the disease of gerrymandering, if you will. Um, Infected goes to recovered. So discouraged voters overcome suppression and become re-engaged. And R goes to S. Engaged voters may lose motivation over time due to fatigue. And then G of T, this is gerrymandering strength, and A of T is the strength of activism. So it grows in response to gerrymandering. The more drastic actions governments take, such as redrawing maps to get an unfair advantage, actually the more activism grows in defense of that. So we'll observe that there's going to be a cyclical model um, of the power margins over time, and gerrymandering will go up and down over time as activism pressurizes these representatives to take down unfair maps or to propose really strong maps if the party in power has enough power to do so. And so here's a diagram of the connections that were just discussed over here. So this is a really important part of the model. This is the derivation of the political dominance function. So an important aspect of the SEIR-GA model is the political dominance function, which is the gerrymandering factor, or PFT, which is a part of the gerrymandering factor, GFT. So if I go back here, this is the gerrymandering function, G over dt. So PFT is defined as this sinusoidal function, and these look like random numbers. They're not, but they've come out of a numerical approach to solving basically a regression. So I'll get into that. So yeah, we found the data from the congressional archives, and basically we looked at the party government split in Congress since 1857. So not just Congress, including the presidency. So the House majority, Senate majority, and presidency all have different, they all cover different powers in the government. And I don't want to get into too much of the governmental specifics, but for the purposes of this model, we just assign proxy weights to the importance of each of these chambers. And, one could argue that these weights may not be very precise or accurate testaments of each of the branches' power importances. But that's something that I can adjust in future iterations. So this is some of the Python code. So basically, if the Republicans or if the Democrats held all three chambers, including both chambers, right, of Congress, so the House and the Senate, as well as the presidency, we call that a unified government. And so if they held all of those chambers, they get a weight of 1 for that year. And so you can see the weight and the power, Democrat power, Republican power over time. I can't fit all of the data here, but I'll show some graphs on the next page. But so we assign weight to each of the chambers, and we calculate how much power weight the Democrats have in a year versus Republicans, and we take the absolute difference. So what encourages gerrymandering is if there's an absolute like insane difference in the power split over time. If it's like neck and neck, 51 to 49% roughly in margins, right? That's not very encouraging for the party in power to do gerrymandering. The party in power typically only gerrymanders when they have enough of a margin to get away with it and they have enough power. So this serves as a good proxy for the power structure in the overall country over time since 1857. So we took the difference in power, the absolute difference between Republicans and Democrats over time. Of course, there's the whole party split and there's like complex political maneuvering that happened over time. This model does not account for those, historical nuances. This kind of just looks at power differences over time. So that's the beauty of it. It doesn't actually matter ideologically what each party stood for. We're just looking for the absolute difference, over time. Um, Okay, so this is a Python function. We used a fast Fourier transform to fit the rough behavior. So these purple dots represent the discrete points of power used, which use the weighting from the previous page over time. And this green graph, roughly fits uh, those points of power over time. And you could argue that um, approval ratings will vary in between those points in time, in between elections. So this serves as a nice like continuation in between elections too. You can make predictions about how much soft power a party had in between elections using this continuous graph. And yeah, here are the coefficients that were computed through this numerical process to get a fast Fourier transform. And I use the NumPy library for this. So here's the model implementation. So for the programming stack, we used Python 3 in Google Colab. And the libraries that I used were NumPy, SciPy, Matplotlib to plot the graphs, and Pandas to manage the data in Pandas data frames. Here's the model structure, pretty much just all the variables that were discussed earlier. And the ODEs were defined in a function through basic Python. And the time-varying political force, it was encoded with all the cosine components that we derived from the fast Fourier transform. Some of the parameters were hard-coded just for the purposes of this research. If I were to continue this in the future, I would probably tweak around the parameters to see if I can, change the output, and also talk to people in government to see what realistic parameters make sense, or even people in think tanks. The time span was 0 to 50 years again. And yeah, we use solve IVP. This is a function from the library scipy.integrate. So I didn't make that function. It's a function that's used by researchers all the time for numerical Python-based methods to solve these fast Fourier transforms. And here's all the code. I won't get into the specifics of it, or I'll get into a little bit of it. So yeah, we're importing all the libraries here. We're defining the variables, defining the parameters. Here is the result of the fast Fourier transform. I don't actually have screenshots of that. That code was on a previous slide, but this is the resulting parameters or resulting coefficients for the sinusoidal function that represents the balance of power. These are the for the diffie first order ODEs. These are the parameters defined again, and the initial conditions. Yeah, this is important. And we're just solving the initial value problem here using .solve IVP. And this is just a graph, the production of the graph. All of these use pretty basic Python, machine learning or data visualization tools. So it's pretty accessible. And I intend to also maybe release this code out to the public once I kind of refine it. But yeah, and it's like really approachable code. So people can definitely like give suggestions on it. That's fine. So here are the results. Um, so this shows how the recovered engaged population kind of grows and then reduces its growth, kind of tapers off over time. So there's the susceptible populations, exposed populations, and infected / discouraged populations. So this was over 50 years again. Let me go to the next slide. Yeah, and this is a really important graph. So gerrymandering strength and activism level. So this shows that, and so the activism level and the political dominance cycle, those both depended on the rough proxy values of the shift in power over time from Congress, and the activism level is kind of coded to be kind of in response to that. As you can see, activism goes up and down. And if you look at the average trend, the average trend is also sinusoidal. It goes up and down over time. But you can see gerrymandering really fluctuates because the party in power, especially for state legislatures, um, some states will shift over time, like really quickly, and political waves came back and forth, especially in around the 1800s or the 1900s. So you can see that gerrymandering strength has more of a up and down trajectory more than activism level. Um, it's not to say that activists are not super reactive, but gerrymandering, the speed of legislators sometimes outpaces, or it tends to outpace activists. And here's a parameter sensitivity analysis. So the higher the beta, you can see that this increases peak discouragement and delays recovery, and the higher gamma recovery rate reduces peak infection and accelerates return to civic engagement. So as you can see, the infected slash discouraged rate goes up, and then it rapidly declines, and then it goes back up again, but at a slower rate. And the gamma, the recovery rate, goes up, and then it just kind of plateaus. Okay. So model validation and data grounding. So the data grounding components, PFT again was derived from 168 years of U.S. congressional records. So that was about like 80 or 90 congressional periods. And we used weighted scoring. So we weighted 0.4 for the presidency, 0.35 for the Senate, and 0.25 for the House. And the Fourier analysis, it basically captures multi-scale political cycles. The exploratory parameters are the SEIR rates, which I kind of played around with. Yeah, they require calibration, which kind of set arbitrary values. The sensitivity analysis, which is on slide 13, it confirms the robustness across the parameters. Um, and the model is structurally sound, but in order to get fine-tuned, accurate approximations, you're gonna need district level data, which is you're gonna have to handle like loads and loads of data, and that's like a bigger project. But in order to pursue something like this, like a bigger project, which I'll talk about, um, here are some planned calibration data sources. I'm not gonna read them all out, but yeah, the important ones are the U.S. Census Bureau. 538 is very well known and well reputed across the gerrymandering analysis community. Um, so those are some big ones. There is also, it's not listed on the slide, but the MIT Election Lab and Harvard Dataverse host their data. It has precinct level, it has census data as well as precinct level voting returns from the 2020 and 2016 elections. So I'll be using that data. I'm actively using that data for a broader scale project, which I'll talk about. So yeah, the results. So the S function drops from 0.85 to around 0.30 within the first 15 years as awareness spread. Exposed and infected peak early, which is actually a good sign because this means that um, we don't like after the dust settles, we don't actually see like a large number of voters being disenfranchised every day, because that force is mitigated by the activism, and recovered and engaged grows steadily. So this is good because this means that people are basically waking up and they're realizing that their vote actually does matter, and activism actually does help fight gerrymandering. So minor oscillations still persist due to ongoing political suppression and voter fatigue cycles. For the socio-political forces, gerrymandering pressure, GFT, spikes early, peaking at 1.5 roughly within the first 5 years. Activism rises in response with a lag, eventually dampening GFT. That's the goal of activism. It's not going to completely reduce it, and one could argue that it's actually good that activism doesn't completely eliminate gerrymandering. Because if gerrymandering were completely eliminated, or almost nearly eliminated, um, then there wouldn't be anything for activists to complain about, and so gerrymandering would silently grow again. So it's actually good that we get kind of a sinusoidal response, and it dampens the gerrymandering factor. So both forces stabilize into a cyclical equilibrium. So unfortunately, that's just how the tides of history go. It's always going to be a push and pull, and yeah, with suppression and resistance. So yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate, but there's always going to be political struggles, and the people will always have to rise up and use their civic duties to actually make change. So this is expected, but it's good that the forces of activism are able to actively meet the forces of gerrymandering in time. And yeah, the cyclical period matches closely with the 10-year redistricting cycle, which makes sense because the census is taken every 10 years, and that data is used to potentially propose new maps based on the shift of demographics and the state legislature's discretion. So conclusions and future work. So key conclusions: gerrymandering can lead to widespread voter discouragement, but its effects are not irreversible. Activism plays a critical role in reducing long-term suppression and restoring civic participation. The model captures both short-term disruptions and long-term voter engagement recovery. So future work, as I talked about before, to make a broader scale project, and I'm actually working on this right now, incorporate real-world electoral data to validate and calibrate model predictions, simulate policy interventions like independent redistricting to study systemic impact, create an open source tool with interactive visualizations for gerrymandering evolution and voter trends using something like Streamlit, Flask, etc., enabling public access and predictive scenario analysis at the district level, and crunch through real census data and voting gerrymandering patterns to fine-tune model parameters for each district. So one thing this model is not doing, it's not actually looking at the real maps, from the past 20, 30, 40 years. That again, that's a lot of data. And currently I'm actively learning, how to apply Python and machine learning to actually get this done. Uh, but I'll talk about that in later slides. It's like a larger project. So acknowledgements for this research. So this research was made possible through the support of George Mason University's College of Science and the ASIP program. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Seshire and Mr. Ogeda Oliva for their invaluable mentorship. Dr. Seshire helped me a lot with the mathematics side of it, and Mr. Alonso helped me with the Python modeling aspect of it. Uh, Coming into this program, I knew about Python. I had a rough idea of things, but I didn't really know how to apply these complex mathematical and machine learning aspects to my model and to my data. So he really helped me with that. So next thing I want to talk about, I guess the last thing, I'm working on a project called Vote Value, and it's basically a web app that allows you to quantify your voting power. So you type in your address. It basically looks at all of the districts that your address resides in, whether that be state delegate, House of Delegate districts, state Senate districts, federal House of Representative districts, and also it looks at the state you're in and analyzes the state Senate race. And it pulls real maps. I'll show you the maps, but yeah, so you enter your address. It shows you obviously where your address is on the map, and it quantifies, giving you a vote value index to show based on the historical margins of your district how much your vote actually matters, using metrics like competitiveness, turnout elasticity, representative access, fairness score, local salience, and last margin in the most previous election. This is just a random address. This is not my address, but and once you enter your address, you can click register to vote, and it directly takes you your state's specific voting website, and your state will redirect you to like any local board or local county election websites. So it makes it really easy for voters to access their voting information. And you can also view your districts on the map, which I'll show in the next few slides. But yeah, once you type in your address, you can see all your federal representatives, and you can also see your local representatives. It's not pictured in the screenshot, but and you can click their contact form to directly contact them. So here's a screenshot of the map. So once you click, go back. Once you click View Districts on Map, it'll take you to this map, and you can look at the exact district border. Some people don't even know what their district looks like. So my goal is to like basically increase the education aspect of electoral politics. So you can see your whole state. You can see all the districts. People may be surprised to see like how weirdly shaped these districts are, and that's basically the result of gerrymandering on both sides of the aisle. And yeah, we've pulled these maps from a variety of sources, including OpenStates. They're very well known in the electoral politics arena, so you can search them up. But also VEST data directly from the MIT Election Lab, which I downloaded from Harvard Dataverse, and of course the U.S. Census data. I'm working to feed in other data sources to like refine the data. And some data is just mock data or placeholder data before I can get specific state specific data from each of the state legislatures, which is an intensive process, but I intend to carry it out in full. So you can also see the colors, red or blue for Republican or Democrat for each of the precincts. So precinct level precincts are like the smallest unit in electoral politics. People think, oh, California is blue, Texas is red, but if you actually look into the precincts, you'll see that there are always pockets of red or pockets of blue, even in blue, distinctly blue or distinctly red states. And so precincts allow you to see what the split of red and blue is even within a district. Okay. Next. Yep. So you can also click use enable selection mode, and you can draw new borders for this map and see how that would have. So you can select up to 3 neighboring districts. You can draw borders for the map, new internal borders to see how the blue percentages and red percentages will shift based on that new map drawing. And I'm developing a new feature on the app where you can, or I already developed a feature where you can export the map. You can put your name on it, your institution, export the map, and you can share it on social media or via email, and you can download it. I've created a custom file format called .vvr, vote value report. So you can basically modify maps and you can propose them. So I'm creating a voting feature where there's like a marketplace of maps, and users can just vote on these maps if this map looks good or if it looks more fair. Now, number one, this allows us to consolidate public opinion on maps. And also, you have an option of sending it once a map gets enough upvotes, you can send it directly to all the districts that are in the map. So if there are 3 neighboring districts you picked, you can send an email to all 3 of those districts with this proposed map saying 100 or 1,000 people support the map. And yeah, let me launch the next one. So yeah, let's connect. If you want to connect with LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and here's a link to my LinkedIn. If you have any questions about my research or the project, you can email me. It's just my first and last name at gmail.com. And I'd be really grateful if any of you were actually interested in using the app in the future. I'm just collecting contact information for beta testing. So here's the Google Forms link, and there's the QR code. I'm not sure. I think the QR code should work, but if it doesn't work, you can just take a look at the link. But yeah, any questions, you guys can fire away. I'd be happy to take any questions about the research or the project.